You are an organizer now.
Yeah, I started the recording.
All right, cool. Thank you. So we'll first dig out on error handling, because it's a kind of new topic. And before talking about a case study, which is actually very less time consuming in this particular session, we'll talk about error handling first. How to handle the errors. So let's talk about what is a good error message. Uh, Good error message means whenever there is an error, obviously it has to be conveyed to multiple parties, either to developer, that happens through software to software communication, whether software submits the error internally to the server, okay, or to the user, okay. Sometimes we tell the error messages to the user also, like your password does not contain a capital character, okay. So in that case, in these particular cases, right? So error message which you send to any of the party should be meaningful. It should not be like this. Unknown error happened on the server. So you don't know. So actually, software doesn't know what error has happened. Okay. And in this case, nobody can resolve this error. Be it developer, be it implementer, be it anybody, they cannot resolve the error. Okay. Because they don't know what is the error, of course. So you need to write down code to handle errors so that you can first of all convey a proper message. Okay. Now again, party can be anything who is receiving the error. Of course, it can be developer, it can be user, it can be any third party. But the message should be more meaningful. Now, how to make it more meaningful? We have exception handler. Okay, it is given by Angular, so we can have this as a service. Okay, and what we can do is we can override the service to write down our own handler. Okay, so what happens is that this service catches every exception which is not handled by anyone. Okay, so if there is any uncaught error, which we call uncaught error, it will be directly going to exception handler and will get printed on console. Why console? Because it's a default service, $log, okay, $log.error, which gets into the play and it logs onto the console. Okay, so if you want that it has to be handled by your code and you want to delegate it to some meaningful way, maybe some kind of error message to the user, poster, okay, or maybe saying that okay, I'm submitting it to the server so that possibly developer can understand that. All that we can do, we have to override it. But when you are doing unit test cases, you can use, again, mock this exception handler, which can be overridden, and then you can, uh, write down your own logic for that, right? Because in unit test case also, there could be some exception. Okay. This is an example how to override. So you can see I'm referring to factory exception handler, right? In the third line, exception handler. So I'm defining it actually. Okay. No need to pass. No need to pass anything. It's just that you are creating your own factory by this name, so obviously it will redefine, it will override the existing exception handler service. Okay. In this, you can expect exception and cause, and you can just throw your exception. Right? When you throw your exception, it will keep on in the continuous loop. Okay. Remember, we are not doing it in the module exception override, not in ng. All those existing belong to ng module. Okay. So what will happen is, what will happen is that whenever there is an exception, the message will be changed. message will be overridden. Okay. Now you can write down your own message, but it is just appending caused by cause, right? So that not only exception, but the cause will also be conveyed. Okay. Now let us come to promises, because a lot of issues come through data, and data comes into the Angular application through some service, and the services are being consumed from any either factory or service or provider or whatever, but in the format of a REST call, API call, which we generally deal with promises, right? So what happens is that this is a typical promise. Okay, so here we are doing nothing but a random function, right? And we have a timeout that after 1000 milliseconds, it will either defer dot resolve or it will do a defer dot reject. Okay, depending on the random result, either it will resolve okay or fail, equal probability. Okay, but rather than understanding this code, basically I have just presented a syntax or kind of excerpt to show you how typically we write promises. Okay, when we write promise, our exception handler does not work in the promises. Okay, it does not take care of any error comes into the picture when promises are getting resolved. Okay, then what? Then we can have a catch block, catch block. Okay, so generally you can write down my asynchronous function, like my previous function was this, right? My asynchronous function, it returns what? Deferred, right? Deferred is nothing but a promise. Okay, so we generally do a then block and just leave it over there. Then block means when you successfully have some resolution from service, from the data. Okay, but suppose data has not come. Okay, nothing has come, neither an error nor a success, nothing. Then you have to convert that into the error. It's not an error, but you have to convert that into an error. Okay, it may be an error also, like timeout. Sometimes your connection is gone out and timeout will be caused by browser. Okay, browser will say, boss, this particular is not getting resolved, so it's the timed out activity. When that happens, it will not come into then block, right? So we have to put a catch block out there. Okay, and in the catch block you can call your own functions. Okay, which can handle your errors. Okay, there's a finally block also, which if you write, it will always call back. So suppose you are chaining, one service to another service. So you are getting an ID from one service, and depending on that ID, you are causing another service to convert, and then whatever data you are getting in from the other service, you are injecting in your controller, right? So what you can do is you can write down a finally block, okay, so that your chain will continue. It will not stop. No, finally it's like either you get success or error, it will always call back.
What in case we have?
It is not associated with the data. Okay, it's like it will always call back whether a success or an error. But you have to understand, if finally is there, then you need to understand, your code has to understand whether it's a success or an error. So suppose in a success, you get an ID from first service. Okay, in finally you can check whether you got the ID or not. You don't get the ID means you don't have anything to convey to the second service. So you'll break the operation from there and display an error message, or maybe some meaningful code over there to write to handle that. No, in finally you should not handle the error. You should handle the error in catch block. Catch block is for that. Okay. Finally is to wrap up. Okay. So this is how we generally put up a catch block. So what I've done is I've created a function init, and then I have intentionally returned q.reject. Okay, which means of course there is an error, right? I've intentionally putting in that. So when I say init.catch, in the function, I can get a cause, right? And I can throw my error. Now to throw an error, I have written down a controller so that I can put that into the controller, and that controller init exception is, it will convert that, okay, this is the name, this is the message, this is a prototype or something, right? All the meaningful bliss, right? Then it will throw an error, right? And it will go to exception handler, and that exception handler will either log into the console or whatever you have written down. Okay. Now what happens is, this is a lot of clutter. If you do for each and every callback, each and every call, if you repeat the same process, it will be like a lot of clutter, right? Lot of code to handle error, right? So how to do it in a neat way? Of course, it clutters the happy path. Solution is, the error message it produced were not really user friendly, number one, of course, and then a lot of errors. So what is the solution? You can do this in such a way that you route all the catch blocks into some function, right, which will handle everything. So some function like show error message, right, it will handle each and everything, right? But then this function has to be there in all the services. You have to create at least one function which is repetition of the code, right? So how generally we do it? We remove that boilerplate. So we call it boilerplate whenever we are writing a redundant code. So what we do is we create a kind of error handler, right? And then we say error handler.call. Okay. Now error handler is a factory, is an assumed factory which will call all your services. Okay. And if there is an error handler will handle it. So what happens is error handler.call. Now you are referring that this is the function on this service, some service dot loaded on some service. And then if there is an error, what it is doing, load additional data, right? If there is an error, the error handler will understand that there is an error in load additional data, and it will raise an error additionally. Okay. Okay. So what it is doing, so this is a common service to call any service. Okay. So it's a kind of a wrapper service basically. Now, sometimes what happens is, if we do this, then also things are not so crystal clear. So what we have done is, we have introduced a decorator. Okay. So what happens is, if you write a decorator on the config time, you can write a decorator, and then in the decorator you can hook up your services to another service. Okay, I'll tell you. See, what if you see on the screen, on the first part of the code there is a service, my module.factory foo. Foo is a service which has got two functions, bar and buzz, right? They are not doing anything as of now, but assume that they are very complex functions and you don't want to clutter all the things into your service, right? You just want that this factory, whatever we have written, like bar and bars functions, whatever they are executing should be covered under some error handler, right? So in that case, you can write down this provide.decorator. So provide is nothing but actually, when you write down a config block, in the config block you will receive provide as an injected item. And provide.decorator can decorate any service. So you need to write down the name of the service. This is by the convention of Angular. It's not that you are creating your own function, but this is by convention. So provide always have a function called decorator, in which you can specify the service name that you want to decorate, and then a function which will be decorator to this function. Okay. Now, what we write down this function and the delegate will be nothing but the sums, this service that you have injected. Okay. Just understand that $delegate equals to foo factory service. Okay. So when you say delegate dot bar, it will give you bar, this function. So what it does is it takes a backup, delegate dot bar backup, and it creates a new function, delegate dot bar. Okay, and then it creates a new function and then it applies over there. Same function will happen because we are doing bar backup dot apply. And then here, before you are doing apply, you can write down your own function, anything like error handling or whatever. So where I have console.log decorated, you can write down your function to handle the error.
For each service, you have to write the operator.
So once it is there, yes. So this question comes up that for each service, how we will handle that. Can any service can have different number of functions, can have different number of errors, right? So how to handle for repeatedly for each and every service? So let's first understand that what we can do in this case. We can pass the services in arrays, okay? And our decorator can understand all the functions because we can run a for each loop, okay, onto the factory and can understand each and every function of that service. And then we can decorate each of the function for error handling. Okay, so the need was to pass all the services in terms of an array. Okay, so this is how we can do. So basically what we have done is we have injected two things here. One is error handler provider and a provide. Okay, provide is by default there. I have injected error handler provider, which is nothing but another provider that I am going to write. Okay, this provider will expose a decorator method called decorate. Okay, and then it will have two things. One is this provide, simple provide, and another is array of delegates. Okay, when I say delegate means services. Okay, and then I need to just inject the service. Okay, I have to go through this array one by one, right? For each of the element of this array, means each of the service, I have to go through the functions, all the functions, and then for all the function, I need to decorate all the functions by my error handler function, right? Another error handler function is again a function basically. Okay, and then I can simply call it, no problem. Okay. So you can see this example controller has become so simple. So you need to just say load additional data, which is another nothing but function, and then some service that load it, and then you can do your stuff in how you were doing so far, without worrying that error would not be handled, because error is now handled by error handler provider. Okay. All right. I think let me just show you sample code for this error handler provider so that you can understand how this code will look like. It would be a little complicated, so we will not go in each and every detail of it, but because I have had it in my Angular training repository, you can go through it anytime. Okay, so if you look at it, error handler is here in providers. Okay, this is the first time we are writing providers, so I will tell you what are the things that you need to understand, because provider is a new concept maybe. So what you can do is in any of the module, this is how we generally create modules, right? Any of the module you can say dot provider rather than dot factory, okay, or dot controller or dot directive. You can say dot provider and the name of the provider. If you want to inject anything, injector will not work in this particular time because all the providers are config time providers. Okay, you cannot really inject a lot of things into it. So best thing is to do it through injector object. Okay, so you see injector object is already being used here. Okay, so you can do it through injector rather than putting in here. You remember generally in controller we write controller and the name and then square bracket and the dependencies, right?
But injector will be available in all the places.
Dollar injector is global, so it will be available everywhere, whether it is controller, factory, directive, anything. Okay, it will be available everywhere. Depends where you want to call it. Okay, generally we don't call it because implicitly Angular calls it. Okay, but you can call it. So again, let me tell you, if you don't put a square bracket here and you don't put your injections here, you can call injector to inject. Okay, when you put up a square bracket and the dependencies, let me give you an example. You remember this scope? So when you do this, injector automatically injects it, automatically, without being called. Okay, but when we don't do it, which is in generally in case of provider, we can explicitly call injector and say dot get. When I say dot get, it will actually give you that particular item. Now in the provider, by convention, it is required you to return an object. So just forget this function block and this for a moment. We need to return some object. Okay. Now in this object, required is $get. $get is to get all the functions. Okay. Now this $get will actually return an object. Okay. So here in my case, handler. You see where handler is equals to a object. And on this object, it is required you to declare your functions. Okay, like I'm doing. In this object, I'm doing function error. If you see call and async. Okay, 3 things. Right. Now what you can do is you can directly call from outside this. You can say error handler dot call. Okay, so in that case it will give you this function call. So sorry, error handler provider you have to say, because out of this code it will called as error handler provider. You understand? Let me show you this. So here I have injected error handler provider somewhere. You see this error handler? No, this is not that. Here. So we can inject this provider and we can call decorate or whatever function we want to call. Okay. So in my case, decorate actually calls from inside. Okay, because I have created this as a global function on this object itself. So I can call decorate, but otherwise I can call these functions also from outside. Okay, that they use. Another thing related to provider is that you can also declare another block called $get set. Okay, in that case it will set. Okay, and you can use whatever you have set in the get. So suppose you are having a function or a property which you are setting in the setter and you are doing some calculation in the getter, you can do that. So providers are generally dealing with the code using getter and setters. You can additionally declare some items on this return object and you can access from outside, like you've seen in my case, right? So I'm calling, like I was explaining you, that I'm calling decorate function on this provider and giving the provider and the service. You can pass multiple services, right? In this decorate function, what I'm doing is services and provide as an input, and I'm doing a for each. Okay. When I do a for each, obviously each element will be one service, right? So one service I call provider decorator, and I pass that service and the decorator function. Decorator function, but nothing but this function, because I've declared in my code, and it will further handle this to this decorate function internally, and this calls my handler.call, this handler.call. If you see, real logic is here. So what I do is, in my, whenever I get this function, okay, when I have wrapped up in my try and catch block. So why try and catch? Why not promise.catch? So see, there are two types of errors. One is synchronous error, another is asynchronous error. You remember I have told you in the start that if there is an error, error handler can catch, but not the promise related error. Right? So what it can catch is the synchronous errors. So if you have written, let's say where a, and then you say a dot something equals to 10, okay, it will cause you an error because a is undefined and you are trying to put up another variable onto the undefined. So these are synchronous errors. Okay. So to handle synchronous errors, I have written this. Okay. So what I will do is result.function. I will execute the function of the service. Okay. If I get an error, then I will catch it over here and raise it. Okay. Now when this function is not really a synchronous function, it's assumed that it's kind of asynchronous function. So asynchronous function, what it will give you? Promise, right? So what I've done is I've stored this apply into a result. Now result will be a promise. Okay. So I've gone ahead and checked whether result and result.promise is there. Then of course it's a promise. Then I'm saying handler.async points to this function. And here I have written my block. So both of them, if you see the synchronous and asynchronous, are calling function error, right? So function error does nothing but it's actually decorates my message and push into my errors. So I can actually get my errors in one particular array, and I can anytime refer back to that array, and it is also logging, by the way, so that it can see on the console. Okay. Now you can do anything with this array, right? Either you can bind your messages, user messages to this array, or you can, like, suppose there is a report error service, right? So you can say, okay, report all the errors to server. Then it will be used to report all the array, all this array, and you can create another API on the error server to report errors. Okay.
In that case, suppose one particular case having any issue, and we have multiple APIs. So we can bind the message in JSON format or something so that we can identify from which service we were getting error. So
exactly. So what you do is in this whole code block, whatever I have done, maybe you cannot do the whole thing. Okay. What I have done is I've just handled all my HTTP errors, non-HTTP errors, and I have put down some description out of it. Okay. Unable to do something. That description comes from the service, right? Now, if you don't want to do this, you can put some context sensitive explanation and keep on logging into this array. Finally, you have all the bunch of errors with you, right? So this is going to bind with all the services, right? Be it whatever service you have pointed out. So all the services with all the errors are stored here, right? You can filter out. You can say, okay, give me all the errors that you have found in so and so service. So you can filter. You have already worked with filters, right? So you can filter.
If it has that service name or something, then you can figure out.
Yeah, we can have error dot service name also.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
We can create.
If I can format in JSON data, then easily can identify.
Error is nothing but a
It's a message.
it's again JSON, but it has a stack trace to it. So it is whether it is synchronous, non-synchronous, it always has a stack trace associated with it. So you might want to choose like what kind of stack trace you want to take up. Okay, stack trace is another type of object. Don't think that it's a normal object. Okay, but you can convert that into string. Okay, so you can keep this error as error equals to some object, and then error dot name equals to the service, error dot message equals to this message. All that you can keep and you can store in the errors. Okay, so that is it. If you want to see this as a demo, you can see that. I'll just quickly show you this. So you see npm start, and then just give me a minute. Local 3000, and in my code I have pushed it already. You see Angular demo. Okay, sorry, error underscore demo. So in error underscore demo, there are a lot of things that you will get. You can, like I said, it's the whole complete reference to how you can handle your errors, whether it is manual, automatic, whether it is synchronous, asynchronous, everything. So let me show you the console also here. So first it says manual handling, second is, and the sub point is synchronous error. Okay, which I'm saying unhandled. When it is unhandled and my service throws an error, what it happens? It will come like this. Right? So this error object, and this is the explanation, and these are the stack trace. Okay. When you handle this using try and catch, okay, it is here because you have handled and you have pushed into the errors, and this is this one is bound to that errors array, so it will start displaying this here. Okay, so you can do it like try and catch. Okay, but when you use like error handler and you say error handler dot call to call every service, right? Then this service, if this is an error, then it will get captured. Okay, like again here and here you can see. So all these are there. You can keep on doing it. Last thing I just wanted to show you here, load some data and load some data with fail. So this will succeed and this will fail, right? So succeed will obviously is okay because you think that it will succeed, and you see here because you don't have any data, you can put some data here and you will see it is succeeding. Right now it's not succeeded. It's like 4 or 4. I don't have any data, but you can see that it's already handled. In this case also the same thing will happen. In this case I was thinking that data would be there to, I have not uploaded data unfortunately. In this case it was bound to fail because this path was different and this does not exist, and it was bound to fail. When it was bound to fail, my toaster should come and show you the data. Sorry, the error. Okay. So we are handling the the error which was happening in promises. Okay, this I wanted to show you. Now, very quickly, I just wanted to show you what has happened with EP and how we have captured that. Let me just open my. There it is. So global error handler, before understanding that how we have captured, let's understand the error, the issue related to error handling, okay? So just wanted to show you how the EP things were working and from where it has originated, the problem has originated. So if you see that we had some kind of forms, okay? So this blue rectangle actually represents nothing but a typical form template basically and a controller, okay? A form and controller, okay? Now user can put up anything and submit, right? It can result to a success as well as a failure, okay? Form data will go to server and server can return some error. Now, how we have done, how we have handled those errors. So basically, we knew that APIs on server generally returns error in two different fashions. Okay, one is that overall application level error. Okay, which can happen that okay, the data that you are asking is not there in DB. Okay, so suppose you are asking for account 101 and 101 does not exist. Okay, it's not form related error. Okay. But there could be another scenario that, okay, in account you have mentioned, let's say ABC, when it should have been 123. Okay. Or maybe in batch number and account, they are not matching with each other. Okay. So it's a kind of data related issue. Yeah. So this API was intelligent enough to categorize them into different buckets, whether it is 400 or 500, whether it is an internal server error or whether it is a data related error. Okay. So API's level intelligence was there, but we did not have any intelligence on our UI. Okay. So what we have done is we have created two different things. One is HTTP wrapper and another is notification service. Okay. So if you see HTTP wrapper is one man army over here that every controller will send the data, the form data into HTTP wrapper and invokes an API. Okay. So HTTP wrapper is a single service which will invoke every damn API. Okay. If there is any API requirement, it will go to HTTP wrapper and say call this. Okay. So HTTP wrapper will actually call any HTTP endpoint. So remember, I'm not saying that you don't create a service, okay, a factory. Factory will be created, but factory when finally will say get me the data from this endpoint, it will not use $HTTP. Okay, it will use HTTP wrapper to get it. Okay, I'll show you the code. Okay. Then the API will return either error or a success, right? If it is a success, obviously return will go back to this template or controller object. But if it is an error, it will either go to notification or it can go to this. So suppose you have mentioned wrong batch number. What do you want as a user to see? You want to see a tooltip on the batch form field saying that boss batch number is not correct. Okay, but if it is a global error, like account number should be in numbers, not in alphabets, then you would like to raise a notification service. Okay, so notification service So the HTTP wrapper is intelligent enough to see if the error is because of 400 or because of 500. If it is 500, I believe it was going to notification, and if it is 400, it was going to this form and template controllers object. Okay, so let's see very quickly that what we have done in this case. Let me just open that. Code here. So if you see, modules are there and services are there. So services outside the modules are common services. So it was a huge project actually. That's why you see a lot of things are going on here. So you see HTTP wrapper, right? It's a service. It does a lot of things. Now get operation. Okay, if you see, get operation is nothing but get. Okay, when you say http.get, so finally it will give you http.get only. Okay, but you can bind it to a lot of things, whether you can bind it to post, whether you can bind it to that. Okay, so we have exposed only single method called send. Okay, send will be called and it will do all the things that it want to, and then it will say get operation. Okay, it can do a get, it can also do a post, both the things, and it will see, if you see here, it will wait for this response to come. Okay, because it's a promise, so it can see whether data.status is a success or a 200 or 204, then it will resolve. Otherwise it will go to handle error. Okay, okay. In previous, there was not a catch block, there was an error block. So we used to write error and then we say again handle error. Okay.
Error is next function of that inside success callback, and catch is outside, right?
Catch is outside. So yes, so when you do a success on HTTP operation, so HTTP operation internally will resolve the promise that then and catch is bound to promise. Okay, then and catch is bound to promise object, but here we are talking HTTP object, $HTTP object. So $HTTP object has an API over then and catch blocks. When you say then means success, when you say catch means error. Okay, it will internally catch it and will give you these two functions involved. Okay, now you handle errors and you pass it to handle error. Okay, now let's see what handle error does. Handle error takes the status whether it is 400 or 500. Okay, when it is 400, it will say notify data exception. Okay, it's a notification service. When it is 500, it will say app level execution exception. Now you see how we have bring in intelligence into the HTTP service call. Okay, and you can call this HTTP wrapper from anywhere. Okay.
But then what kind of services? I mean, if you're writing services for any API, how
no, you are not getting it. Then let me just show you. So suppose
some controller and how we are calling the services.
Hold on. So suppose you are saying get transaction states. So it will say HTTP error wrapper.send this particular API call.
Okay.
Okay. So it will pass the URL. But when it is like post call, like this, okay, operation is post and data is this. So you are not using $HTTP, you are using HTTP wrapper.send. Understand? Because you know that all the errors will be handled by himself. right? So you can just remove the clutters. You can see how clean this service is.
We are handling only URLs.
Not only URLs, but if it is
get post and type of methods.
exactly get post methods. Yeah.
So, single
Right. So coming back to that, you can see the notification service also a bit, because you will get to know how we are dealing with it. So it has got some intelligent concept. Let's deal with it later. So app level exception is doing that, it is raising a toaster. You know toaster that you could see in my previous project, right? You can see that on the top. So that is called as a toaster basically. Okay. So app level exception is nothing but it raises a toaster. No good thing. But in data exception, which was like, it is because of the wrong data. So you have to exactly pinpoint that field. Okay. Now, how do we do that? Because in the exception that I have received from the server finds that this particular field in the whole data has got a problem. Okay. So it is called as property path. We resolve the property path to the field name. Okay, we figure out the field name. Okay, and we also localize the message. Okay, because suppose you are showing the form in French, you want to also display the error in French, right? You don't want to display error in English, right? So we figure out the field and we also figure out the message. Okay, and we localize it so that it will be again in French, and then with the field name we figure out where the field is located onto the page using query selector. Okay, we wrap it under this. So it's a typical wrapping up the normal element into the Angular element. So you can say Angular.element and then you can figure out the scope. So when you are outside the controller, you don't have liberty to call $scope. So you remember this is a notification service. It does not have that scope of that controller, right? So using that element, we bind it onto Angular element and then L.scope will give you that scope of the controller. Okay. Okay, and then you can just very conveniently you can just put some attributes onto it and compile. So this is a compile service which is given by Angular. So when you do this compile service, all the things that are there that you want to put up onto the HTML tag, you can bind it onto attribute. You see, a lot of attributes are added, and then I said compile. Everything will be compiled, and suddenly the action that you want to do will perform by the Angular. The next digest cycle of the Angular will pick up that attribute as like either directive or anything that you want to create. Okay. All right. So from outside, we have handled that how the form field suddenly will have the tooltip. Okay. So suddenly it will show the tooltip and the red border because we have added a tooltip class also. So as soon as we put up a class, it will create a red border around the field and show a nice tooltip. Okay. You understood? So this is the case study of EP global error handler. If you want to see localization service, you can see that. Generally, this is another case study, but it's not such a huge one, so we did not have a session for that. So get localized message does nothing, but it actually figures out from localization service. So you see localization service dot get message, right? So for getting the message, you need to pass down a key. Okay. So what happens is, in my localization service, I used to have a key and a value pair for each and every message. Okay, key value. So key can be anything. Okay, but value is the value in that language. Okay, so in my English bundle, it will be all English messages. In my French bundle, it will be all French messages. When I bundle it, there would be a file altogether, which you download from the server again. It is not in the project. When we start the application, we download these bundles, all the bundles. Okay. And then whenever I do get message, it will go to my localization service, and see here it is already doing fetch resource for module. Okay. Now when I say get message, it will actually get from the resource bundle the bundle name like English, French, or whatever, and then the property name. Okay, and then it will give you the message. Okay. So it is another thing. All right, I think that is it. If you have any question or anything, any concern, any query?
So in which branch it is the report is there?
It's in the same branch. This one, right?
Yeah, your time.
It's in
Your tag.
sure, 19th, tag 19. You need to do git fetch because you want to see the new tag. So if you see, I have also added 18th number tag, and I've added my inbox application. Okay, so you can copy this and send it to me. And there is a 19th tag which has got global error handler case study. Okay, if you go to it, you will find out in the app you have error underscore demo. You have error underscore demo, and there are two files that I've added inside. One is for controller, because controller in itself is a module actually. So error demo, and another is provider. Okay. Any question on this?
I look into the code, how it is working there, try to.
Yeah, please. Shishir, do you have any question on this from your side?
No, no, Devender. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we don't have exercise on these case studies anymore, but because a lot of code that I've shown has to be digested, understood. So maybe you can also ask them to go through the code, understand the code. If there's any error or problem or query, they can raise it on email or maybe discuss on the phone. Okay.
Sure, Devender.
Sure. All right then. Maybe on Wednesday we'll have next case study, which is also another interesting one related to grid. And grids are like used everywhere in the applications. A lot of applications use grids, so it will be good enough and interesting exercise to attend. Okay. All right. See you there at Wednesday.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.